Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'm Michelle Histan, Executive Director of BPHL and Director of Innovation at Independence Blue Cross. And, it's a really hard time right now, and we are really feeling it in Philadelphia and in cities around the country. And one of the commitments we made when we started BPHL was that it would be an equitable and diverse platform that reflected our city. So that's one of the reasons we feel really fortunate to have Councilmember Derek Green with us today, because he is a constant champion for diversity and equity. And we're excited to have him share his thoughts on how we can use crisis as a catalyst for change and move us forward from this. So Councilmember Green, thank you so much for being with us.
So thank you, Michelle. Thank you for the work BPHL started last year with your Innovation Festival, bringing a lot of different speakers from a lot of different backgrounds together to talk about a whole host of issues. I think thank you for continuing this type of communication, even in this global pandemic, and we're doing everything virtually, but it gives an opportunity to continue to have conversation and dialogue in ways somewhat differently than we've done in the past.
Thank you so much. So maybe just start by telling us what the past, 72 hours or 4 days have been like for you.
Well, it really started about a week ago when we saw the unfortunate killing of George Floyd, and then just seeing all of the interactions that happened in Minneapolis, and just it's as an African American male, it was just really painful to see that. Having a young son who's a teenager now on the autism spectrum, and so it was just really painful and challenging just to see that video and see the impact that it had not only on the Minneapolis community but around the world. And then from there, seeing some of the protests that were peaceful, and then they merged into the violent protests and unrest we had in other parts of the country, and then here in Philadelphia. And so Saturday evening and getting up Sunday morning was very painful to just see that. But then I got a chance to go downtown. I was at 16th and Chestnut, and just seeing the people from all over the city, different ethnicities, religious backgrounds, who were just come out to just clean. Someone put out a call on social media and asked people just to come out and just clean our city and help repair our city. So that was very positive. And then, Sunday night, we had additional, violent unrest in other parts of the city, in some of our neighborhoods. And so yesterday I had a chance to go out to 52nd and Jefferson. And once again, you had people from a lot of different backgrounds who came out to just clean our community and just do that. And then today I was at Broad and Shoe, and there was a retail shoe store that was lit ablaze and it got burned out. And so I was out there with Congressmember Dwight Evans, and council colleague Isaiah Thomas, Councilmember Kendra Brooks also came out, and we were just cleaning the street and picking up the glass, and we had the streets department come out. They also helped us in doing that. And then from there, I went to a couple of polling places just to see, because today is election day in Philadelphia, just to see the outreach. And as an elected official, also a committee person in my ward in Mount Airy, we went from having normally 830 polling places to about 190. So I just wanted to get a sense of what was happening in my community. And then I also had a chance to go to New Covenant Church in Mount Airy also today, because the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium was doing testing today. And that's an initiative started by Dr. Ayla Stanford and Reverend Marshall Mitchell, really providing the ability for people to get tested. Many people have not been tested, and that's something we've got to deal with, because in spite of all this unrest, we still have a global pandemic going on. And so they say they'll probably test about 300 people today. They think it'll probably pick up a little bit for those who go to vote. So, the last couple of days, this last week has been really challenging, where we're dealing with some of the historic racial injustice we've had in our nation. And then you intertwine that with a global pandemic that we have not seen in 100 years.
Yeah. You've been busy the last few days, and I know that everybody in the community really appreciates seeing leadership turn out. The cleanup efforts have been phenomenal. My son and I went downtown, and by the time we got down there was almost nothing to do because so many people had come out. It was really, really incredible. So we had, I have so many questions for you, but we just had a question come in from someone watching. What
Mhm.
is the city doing to include everyone on the growth via inclusion in mixed income buildings rather than being pushed out by gentrification?
Well, that's something that we have been talking about that for some time. I know my colleagues in City Council, especially my district council colleagues. I'm an at-large member council, so I represent the entire city of Philadelphia. I think of colleagues like Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson, who represents South Philadelphia, primarily west of Broad Street, and then going down to the airport. And he's really ground zero, trying to balance this increased development in our city, but also not displacing longtime homeowners. So he's been a real champion for some of the incentives we've done in the city, like the long-time owner-occupant program, to try to help taxes not raise so dramatically for homeowners. He's also been a champion, like all of us on city council, on things like a homestead exemption, which helps to provide a little benefit from the increase in a person's property assessment. So we're trying to do as much as we can, and it's a balance, because you want to have your city to grow and develop and bring in revenue that you can use for all the quality services that we need, like for our Parks and Recreation Department, quality life, like a health centers. But you have got to do it in a way that balances, so people don't feel like they're being displaced out of their own communities.
No, that's such a good point, and thanks for sharing all those initiatives. I think people feeling like they're being displaced and people feeling unrest and all of the things that have been happening over the past few days, people are really frustrated, right? So I'm wondering if you can talk about what people can do to create sustainable change when it comes to society's treatment of people of color. For people who are listening, protesting is one platform, but what else can people do to create change and to do actionable things to help? I think people want to help right now.
Right. Well, I mean, sustainable change comes in a lot of ways. There's not one way to create progress. When you think about some of the change agents we've had in history, from someone like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but then you had other people who people may not be as familiar with, like A. Philip Randolph, who organized the March on Washington. So we have to have people do a lot of different things. People have their own gifts and skills that they can provide. But we need people to stay engaged. We need people to, today is election day. I see your I voted sticker today. We need people to participate in our electoral process. Yeah. We need people to participate in our budget process and letting us know. I say I'm just a city employee who just happened to be, rehired by people in the city of Philadelphia twice. And so I take that as my responsibility to reach out and listen to people from all perspectives. But we need people to stay engaged and let us know their thoughts, concerns, because too often in what I see in society, those that raise the most attention get the most attention. But the vast majority of us are kind of in the middle, going from one perspective to the other, trying to do all that we can to either, raise our children, help our grandparents or aunts and uncles or others in our family, just trying to get through the day. And so for people to stay engaged and hold us accountable. I really believe in the whole concept of the marketplace of ideas. I meet with friends and people from all different perspectives and positions, because that's how I can get information in order to see what's happening in the city of Philadelphia. I often try to get out of City Hall as much as possible, and I go from anywhere from the far northeast to Southwest Philadelphia to Fishtown to Southwest Philadelphia to South Philly, just to try to get a perspective of what's happening in our city, because you can't really say you represent the entire city of Philadelphia unless you get out there. And so when I was telling you about some of the things I did over the past couple of days, that goes with my philosophy that you have to spend more time out of City Hall than in City Hall to really see what's happening in Philadelphia.
I love that. We talk so much about empathy and understanding people in the innovation work that we do. And that's exactly what you're hitting on, right? You need to spend time with all different people in the community to understand their perspective and where they're coming from. So that's really beautiful. We had another question come in. What do you say to the people that say their vote doesn't count?
Well, I say to people, that's not true. When you say, I'll give you an example. So my grandfather was able to purchase our family farm in Greenville, outside of Greenville, North Carolina. He rented the farm from 1938 to 1943 and was able to buy that farm in 1943. The only time that my grandfather wore a suit was to basically go to church and to vote. And I think about his grandson, and I'm someone who never got a chance to meet my paternal grandfather, was able to go from people asking him whether he'd be able to vote and saying, well, you don't have a right to vote. And he said, well, I am a property owner and I have rights to vote like anyone else, to we go through the 64 the Voting Rights Act and forward to now we have elected officials like myself and others. This only occurred by voting. And when you look at what happened in the 2016 election, and the fact that if we had more people that had come out to vote like they did in the 2012, let alone the 2008 election, we would have a different result than we have now in reference to who represents us. And so when people say voting doesn't make an impact, I say it absolutely makes an impact. I think of my niece who now lives in Houston. She used to live in Germantown and used to have a beauty salon. And she dealt with other, merchants on Germantown Avenue, and they're regulated by rules in Harrisburg that's done by a state licensing board. It references to hair braiding and what you can do as a beauty salon owner. Imagine if just for example, this Germantown Avenue, some of those beauty salon owners and Germantown Shelton came together, went to their state representative and said, you know what, we have some concerns regarding the regulations that were put in effect probably in the 50s or 60s, but they impact how we operate our business. And so that's when people say voting matters. You can reach out and they could be lobbying their state representative just like any other organization or lobbyist group from a business association, others, to get some change done that impacts the way they run their business.
Thank you. That's phenomenal. I love that. I could not agree with you more. I went out and voted this morning, and I encourage everyone watching to make sure who's in Pennsylvania to make sure they go out and vote today. Because if you don't make a vote, if you don't vote, you've also made a stand and made a decision, right? So you need to make the right decision for the candidate that you want, the candidates that you want to see in office. So we have another question that came in. You mentioned the city budget. Do you have any insights on what might occur during the budget process with the mayor's budget, with Comptroller Reinhardt's proposal and Councilman Dom's proposal that are all being discussed right now?
Well, that's one of the things when I say when people ask, well, what can they do? They can let us know their thoughts regarding the budget. Just like some of the different ideas, the mayor had to put together a new budget. I think that's the first time in the city's history where a mayor had to reintroduce a budget on May 1st. We're currently doing budget hearings as we speak virtually, getting perspectives from not only the city departments who are testifying, but also getting perspectives from a number of people in the community. So I serve on the Philadelphia Cultural Fund. This is an organization that provides thousands of dollars to grassroots community organizations, arts and culture organizations around the city of Philadelphia. And in the mayor's budget proposal, the Cultural Fund was zeroed out. And so members of the Cultural Fund, both their board members and organization that have been recipients, have been communicating to city council members regarding their concern regarding that proposal in the budget. So we'll look at that. I know I want to put those dollars back into the budget. I think that advocacy and reaching out and you say staying involved, I think it's had some perspective with other members of council. I can't speak for them, but we're going to go through a budget process to go through all the hearings, and we put together a budget working group, which includes me as chair of the finance committee, our council president, our majority leader, who's also the chair of law and government. You mentioned Alan Dom, he's chair of fiscal stability, our chair of appropriations, and our chair of commerce, economic development. And so we've been meeting as a small working group, and we're going to go through the budget line by line, and we're going to try to look at different ideas on how we can bring more revenue into the city of Philadelphia. But in addition to serving as an at-large member of council, I also serve on the board of the National League of Cities and serve as the first vice president for the Pennsylvania Municipal League. So I've been reaching out to some of my colleagues in other parts of the country and getting information about what additional federal dollars may be coming back to the city of Philadelphia. And so there's a real possibility that we will possibly get some state and local revenue reimbursement. That's what really put us in that $649 million hole. So we'll look at all the different ideas and suggestions, and we added another session date to council June 25th. And if we need to add more, we will see, but we're going to work collectively to try to come up with a budget that moves the city forward.
Thank you. And thanks for that work. And thank you for the work on the culture piece. It's incredibly important. I want to talk a little bit about your work with diversity and inclusion. And you introduced an anti-discrimination bill that was signed in 2017. And it essentially, and correct me if I don't capture this correctly, but I think the spirit of it was really to make sure that businesses who discriminate, be it against employees or customers, repeatedly are at risk of losing their license. And I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about if you've seen change happen since then as a result of that, or what we still need to work on.
Well, we still have a lot of work to do, not only in this city, not only in the state, but across this nation in reference to how people of difference are treated. I have, as I said earlier, a son on the autism spectrum, so I'm very attuned to how people are treated, if they have a physical learning difference. And in reference to that legislation, it really came about because in the fall of 2016, from my recollection, there were some videos that came out of a bar owner that was a bar, an LGBT QIA bar in the city of Philadelphia, and really had some very derogatory comments made about African American patrons that would attend or would try to attend that bar. And for me, the fact that this occurred, and it made me think that if this had been targeted toward an African American woman or to someone else, I think it would have been a heightened response. But because it was targeted to an African American LGBTQIA community, it didn't get the same level of attention. And so for me, as I think about my son, I think about my wife, and think about others, we have to be open to being advocates for others. And so it kind of really challenged me and said that we need to take some action. So we introduced that legislation working with the Philadelphia Human Relations Commission. We were able to get the legislation passed. And there was a number of steps that were taken in reference to diversity training. But this is not a new issue. I learned from others and from some of the work I did in the past with our City Public Health and Human Services Committee, especially coming out of some of the HIV and other challenges we've had over the years. This has been an ongoing level of discrimination for Black members of this community. So it was something that needed to occur. We made some strides, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. Excuse me.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's funny, you said, I just think of myself as a city employee, but your resume is pretty impressive for a city employee. You have a law degree and you were an ADA formerly. I'm wondering if you could give any tips to folks who want to get into politics who don't have your background and your degree, because I think understanding the law the way that you do is impressive, and it's important for members of city council or of city government. But I think one of the things that we're seeing, and we've seen since the last election, the last presidential election, is more people are getting engaged in local politics, which is great, right? That's a great way to make change. But I think a lot of folks are hesitant if they don't have that background or that training. So I wonder if you have any tips for people who are getting started, who maybe don't have as much exposure to the law.
Well, I had an opportunity to go to law school, and did also have the opportunity to go to, and I went to Temple Law School. I had a chance also to attend the University of Virginia. But just because you have some parchment behind your name or degrees before your name, or even the title, that's why, I just call myself a city employee. I don't really even like the title Councilmember, which is another piece of legislation we worked on to take it from councilman or councilwoman to council member to make it more gender neutral. But it's just being an advocate for your community. You have people that have been, outstanding change agents in the history of this world that have not had any specific pedigree or background. I really started, actually when I was in law school, I was a judge of election for my ward and division when we lived in East Oak Lane, and just continued to work and put in the work and getting to know people. But I think if you're a person that's passionate with ideas and suggestions, you should take on the mantle of running for office. Now, it's not it's at times can be thankless. You have to deal with a lot of stressful issues that can be a challenge and a stress on family, because you're trying to do a lot of things and trying to serve a lot of people because you are a servant leader. But at the same point, if you have an interest in providing and giving back, I think anyone should have the interest and passion. They should get engaged, and that's what's happened in the past. That will also happen in the future. So I would say you should do it.
That's so nice, and it's so exciting to see so many people getting involved, and I hope more turning out to vote. I know we talked about voting and if it matters, and it matters so much. So I would encourage anyone watching to continue. There are so many resources in the city to think about, running for office or getting involved. And I appreciate your encouragement to those folks who are interested. So 3 of your platforms or objectives are to reduce poverty, to improve education, and to promote criminal justice reform. And I think in light of everything going on, the past several days, and with your background as an ADA, I'm curious on how you think we need to innovate around criminal justice reform in particular. Where do you want to see change?
Well, that's a big issue. And we've made some change in the city of Philadelphia, and I go back to my time when I was an assistant district attorney, and some of the types of things that we've done in our criminal justice system in reference to decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. We made some changes in bail, and I've had hearings in City Council regarding bail reform about a year or so ago. First Judicial District, reduced their fees in reference to someone going or having to pay bail. And what people don't realize is that when someone is arrested, that means that an officer or others believes probable cause that a crime has been committed, but they have not been convicted. They have not been adjudicated of committing that crime. But if you're someone that doesn't have resources, and we learned this in some of our hearings, if you can't afford bail, and back before, the First Judicial District was adding a 30% fee on top of that. But if you can't afford your bail and you need to come up with $1,500, $2,500 to get released, you have people that don't have that money. And so they end up being convicted before they've been adjudicated. And so they're in our prison system who've been charged with a crime, but have not been convicted for the crime. But they don't have the money to be able to pay their bail. And there's been situations, and we've had some organizations that have gotten started, like the Philadelphia Bail Fund and others who've tried to help address this issue. It started really out of an initiative they were doing on Mother's Day to help bail out women who had low-level offenses. And I remember during our hearing, there was a young lady who, she was not young per se, but she looked young, and there was a fight that was in front of her house, and she came out to see what was happening, and she got arrested. And it wasn't for the bail fund, she would have lost her job because she couldn't afford the bail, and that would have had an impact on her family, which has an impact on poverty in our city. And so these are some of the things that we've got to deal with, and I think we need to make those changes in our criminal justice system, like bail reform. So we're not saying that if you're impoverished, that you're going to be convicted of a crime when you have not actually been adjudicated.
Thank you. That's really interesting, and it's hard for those of us who don't know all of the details around those situations. It's really enlightening to hear how it works, and I appreciate that you're fighting for that. So we're just about out of time. I guess maybe one more question I wanted to ask you is, there are a lot, but I guess I'll ask. I have so much to ask. Maybe just talk about, you're in city council now. So you were elected to city council in 2015 and then re-elected in 2019. Why city council? I want to know, if you can share a little bit about why this role and how you think you can affect change in this role.
Well, I think the city council is at a local level, and I'm a person, as I said earlier, like the marketplace of ideas like policy work. So city council gives you the opportunity to, use your legislative background or legal background to help draft policy, but also it gives you the ability to come in contact with people at a very personal way and deal with constituent services. I was just dealing with a situation last night where a contact of mine reached out to me because their child was arrested during a protest yesterday. So it allows you to provide that direct constituent service and try to help people. I talked about earlier about being a servant leader, and it does in a way that you're not as distant from those that you represent. Whereas at the the state level, you're in Harrisburg for a good portion of your time. You're in the state capitol. It's not as easy to come in contact with your elected official. And then when you get to the federal level, is even more of a barrier. So, City Hall is a people's place, allows people to engage, and also allows me to get ideas and thoughts from various people trying to move our city forward. And I think as you get into other legislative bodies like the Pennsylvania General Assembly or Congress, and I have great friends who are elected in those spaces, it's a little more removed than at the local level, where you can really engage with people and make change. And from my work with the National League of Cities and the Pennsylvania Municipal League, a lot of the great ideas and policies that I think are moving our country forward are coming at the local level.
We're really glad to have you at the local level and really appreciate all the work that you're doing for our city at a time when it's always needed, but it feels like these days it's especially needed. So we really appreciate that. For folks watching, I would encourage you to visit Councilmember Green's website. You can read more about his background and his work. Anything else you want to share or anything you want people to go do following this?
Well, this has been a global crisis, both from a public health and also from an economic development perspective. And we were all, getting used to using all these various platforms and communicating with us and each other in a way that we have not done probably in the past. So it's both been a crisis and also an opportunity. And I remember the early part of this pandemic, I was on a call and someone provided an article from McKinsey that looked at COVID-19 from a 5-stage perspective. The first 3 phases were resolve, resilience, and return. And resolve is kind of like if you trip and fall and you're just kind of stumbling, trying to figure out what happened. Resilience is that you realize something happened and you're kind of getting through that situation of just falling. And the return is the focus. How do I get back to where I was before I tripped? And so in the public and private sector, we'll focus a lot of time and energy on the resolve, resilience, and the return. But the last 2 pieces really talk about reimagination and reform. So when I think about BPHL Innovation Fest and the fact that you're trying to innovate us as a city and have different thought leaders and conversations, that allows us to also focus on that reimagination and reform of what we need to do. We'll come out of this crisis, but we should use this time as an opportunity to kind of reimagine the city and also reform our city going forward so we can be a much better city for all our constituents and the people that live here and work here.
Oh, geez, that is exactly what we have to do. And thank you so much. That is where we need to be, and gives me like a little bit of hope for going forward in a really tough time and a tough week. So thank you so much. And we're so grateful to have you as an ally to that work and helping carry that forward and a leader in that space. So thank you so much, Councilmember Derek Green. Thanks to everybody watching. Please go vote, take action, check out all of the work that all of our city council members are doing, and we'll see y'all next time.
All right, take care.